So, I'm going to go over the rules again. So, we're going to have 2 cycles. So you'll each get to ask a question of one of your opponents up here, and you'll get to respond to that, and then they'll get to respond. But if there's something that 2 folks are talking about and you want to jump in on, you can raise that blue card on your seat, and I will call on you. So, Supervisor Reed, you get to pose the first question.
I do?
You do?
Oh, man.
So, and you guys are going to each get to ask 2, but you got to pick 2 different people. You can't just pick on one person.
Okay, I'll propose my first question to Senator Wiener. I'm sorry, Senator Leno. Please, don't make it worse than I just made it, please. Please, forgive me, Senator. Senator Mark Leno, at our first debate, you said that Senator Wiener's housing bill, SB 827, makes great sense, yet a few days later at a different forum in front of a different audience, you said you could not support it. So what's your position on this bill, and why does it seem to be different at 2 different locations?
So this is not, first of all, I'm about a foot shorter, but those Jewish gay guys, I have heard this criticism before, Supervisor, so I went back and I looked at the tapes, and what I said at the United Democratic Club was that I understood what the Senator was trying to do with his Bill 827, and that I had serious concerns about it, and I listed those concerns. Number 1, that there's no protection from displacement and gentrification, which can easily happen, because as we put public investment into transit, the property around it will become more valuable, and there will be great incentive for the demolishing of existing low-income units for much denser and expensive units. I also said there was no requirement for additional affordable housing. If we're going to allow for all this upzoning, then we should at least get some additional affordable housing beyond the current inclusionary requirements. And then between the 2 forums, there was the assessment by the San Francisco Planning Department, which pointed out a number of concerns that I was not even aware of. Number 1, a transit corridor could be a street that has a bus on it every 15 minutes. Not just a train line, but a bus running every 15 minutes. Could be upzoned to 45 or 85 feet, and with density bonus all the way to 100 feet. That is going to take away a lot of our local planning. And also design elements will be sacrificed. 100% lot coverage, no more setbacks. These are real concerns. I understand that Supervisor Wiener is aware of these concerns. He's a talented legislator who will deal with them, and we'll see what he's able to do, but there were major differences.
2 minutes to respond.
And I'll just say that from my understanding from Senator Wiener, those are issues that he made clear that he planned to address. The legislation was introduced. He made it clear that he was not, the intention is definitely not to displace people, and he is proposing several amendments to address those issues. But I think the issue was just hearing one thing at one debate and then something else at another. But ultimately, I think that it is important that we do all that we can to build more housing, and no one knows how it feels to be displaced more than I do, coming from the Western Addition and watching my community displaced. So we definitely need more housing, and we need more housing faster. We need to make sure that there are protections for existing residents, and we have to be responsible about that both on the state and the local level. We also need to cut through the red tape to deal with issues around affordability and building that housing faster and coming up with creative solutions. So I'm looking forward to making sure that not only his bill passes, but it doesn't have the negative impacts that you mentioned in your statement.
Amy would like to jump in. Senator, you're gonna get a minute to respond to.
So let's be clear that there's already 45,000 units that have been entitled in San Francisco, and so the next mayor, they're really gonna have to be someone who can work with the different departments to cut through that red tape and do interdepartmental work to speed up the processing. Let's be clear that thousands of units have been kept empty in San Francisco because of Airbnb legislation that London Breed actually allowed that didn't have the right kind of common sense regulations, okay? Let's be clear that SB 827, the planning department, just did an assessment and they found that the entire city of San Francisco can be upzoned through this legislation because every place in San Francisco is within a half a mile from a bus stop. So this is very important that we take a giant pause and we address the issues in that, but we also work to activate the empty units, and I have a plan in which to do that.
To the one thing about Airbnb. Oh, you can, do you want to?
Let her decide on point.
Okay, let's keep it.
So I need clarity about the year before last I introduced legislation proposing the cap for short-term rentals, number one. Number two was vetoed by the mayor. So explain to me what you mean by legislation that I proposed. And just recently there was an article in the Chronicle that talked about how with the settlement that our city attorney put forth and the work that we did to get this industry regulated and under control, that we have seen a dramatic decrease in the number of illegal short-term rentals. The Office of Short-Term Rentals has been working tirelessly to address these issues. The numbers don't lie, so can you specify exactly what you're talking about? Because that doesn't make any sense.
So the year was 2015, and I was supporting David Compos's common sense regulations so that we couldn't allow Airbnb users to put their units onto the platform without showing that they had gone through the permitting system. London Breed and 5 other moderates on the Board of Supervisors voted against that.
Actually, that wasn't what we voted against.
All right,
and
we're gonna move on because this could go on there. Senator, you get 1 minute. You guys will both get the mic back, so if you just want to talk about Airbnb, you can do that.
Well, just on that point, I want to side with Amy on this particular, in that there was a vote on some David Compost amendments, and I know Supervisor Kim was there as well, that would have required that the platform, like Airbnb, not allow unregistered, meaning illegal, hosts on it. That's the way we can enforce it. The department can't enforce it. And since the settlement, which requires Airbnb to do exactly what the Compost amendments would have required, which I believe quite accurately Supervisor Breed did not support, that is what has gotten about 50% off the site. With regard to affordable housing, I had authored the inclusionary zoning ordinance back in year 2002. And from it, we've gotten literally thousands and thousands of below market rate units because we now require for-profit developers to provide a percentage of all of their for-profit market rate housing to be below market rate.
Jump from Sacramento to Airbnb, no problem. Right. Supervisor Alioto, you get to pose the next question.
Okay. When, this is to London Breed, when I first met you, you were very much very much against tasers, against our police officers having tasers. As a matter of fact, you tried to convince me of the many reasons why the officers should not have tasers, because you claimed at the time officers were so out of control that they'd be using tasers all the time. My question to you is, recently I read that you are now for tasers. I want to know why you changed your mind.
So that's an exaggeration. I basically said I had some concerns about tasers in general. And the fact of the matter is, we worked hard at the Board of Supervisors to bring in the Department of Justice to make recommendations to reform our department. At the time, I basically said I was concerned without reforms of giving officers another tool until we moved in a direction where there was reform in our police department. 272 recommendations from the Obama administration, and one included tasers. It was a hard conclusion for me to come to. Over half of those 272 recommendations have actually been implemented in the department. And after discussions with people in my community, discussions with police officers, discussions with the chief, I came to the conclusion that, I hate guns. I hate guns, and I don't want to see guns used in our city that murder people, whether it's the police department or anyone else. And if a taser is going to stop that, if a taser is going to change that, then I will support tasers. I will support their implementation. And just to be clear, I have never said that I oppose them. I said I have serious concerns, and that's exactly what was said about the issue.
All I wanted to know was, why have you changed your mind? Because the police reforms that were needed for the tasers did not happen. So why are you for tasers now without all of the police reforms that are supposed to happen, and just changing it in the last week? What's happened in the last week that made you decide to change your mind?
You got a minute to respond.
And actually, it wasn't what was happening in the week. I mean, I've been working along with Supervisor Cohen on police reforms. I remember, sadly, when my cousin was killed by the San Francisco Police Department in Hunters Point, and there was no investigation, no independent investigation. We put on a ballot measure, and now every officer involved shooting, there is an investigation. That's right. And part of the recommendations of the Obama administration, Department of Justice report makes a recommendation for tasers. And so I'm supporting that recommendation in addition to the other 271 recommendations. So it's not about changing my mind. I mean, everyone changes their mind, but I never said I was opposed to tasers. I said I had serious concerns about tasers, and I decided that based on these recommendations and the fact that over half of those reforms have been implemented in our department, that I am supporting it. And just to be clear, as mayor, there will be no fears of an advocate to make sure there's robust training and there's oversight to make sure that they're used properly.
Senator Leno has invoked his blue card privilege.
I'm going to revoke my invoke because of the correction I heard Supervisor Reed make, so I don't want it.
Never mind. Whoa. All right. Supervisor Jane Kim, you are up next to ask a question. Oh, quickly before, if you don't need to be using your phone, it's actually, there's so many people that the bandwidth downstairs in the overflow room, so if you guys, some of you stop playing with your phones, that'd be awesome. Also, this is super compelling.
So this question is for Angela Alioto. Homelessness is a huge issue in my district that I represent and across the city. You've worked on this issue for decades, and I've also worked on it throughout my time as supervisor. At best, we can say we've held steady, but that's not nearly good enough. So what would you propose to allow us to finally move forward on this issue as mayor?
Again, when we did the plan from 2004 to 2011, the key to homelessness, the key is permanent supportive housing. Well, shelters is not the key. Shelters are the problem. The navigational centers, I just met with Jeff, the head of the department today. The navigational centers are temporary. They have to have from temporary to transitory to permanent. You can't take care of somebody, have them get well, and then put them back in the same atmosphere that they came from. The city and county of San Francisco spends millions of dollars in putting people back into the same atmosphere they came from because the permanent supportive housing was stopped. We had it in the pipeline, and it was stopped. We need to put those buildings, there's a good 12 of them, that need rehabbing, put them back into the pipeline and go from the navigational centers in transitional and then into permanent supportive housing. When we housed the 11,000 people, there was 94% of lack of recidivism. which means 94% of all the people we house are still living in those units in the city and county of San Francisco. What's happening right now is we're just literally putting them back in the street, pouring money into putting them back in the street. So what's missing, the key, is permanent supportive housing. Also, you know, I have fought years of my life for mental health. I created the Mental Health Task Force when people in San Francisco didn't believe in the concept of mental health. I created the advisory board. The state and the federal government gave us more mental health funding while I was president of the Board of Supervisors in the city ever got from state and funding sources. Then when I did the homeless plan in 2004, the federal government gave us more federal money for funding. You know, when we have President Trump and Vice President Pence as the people they are, you better believe some of our rights are going to be taken away from, and it's going to be the mentally ill, it's going to be the civil rights, and you need to have a fighter there who knows how to deal with them.
Thank you. Supervisor Cooney, you have 2 minutes for response.
So I was also going to talk about how, you know, I actually spent a night in one of our homeless shelters. I decided to go through the shelter reservation system. I went to Mission Neighborhood Resource Center. I waited online, and I ended up staying at next door shelter. And it became very clear to me that night that homelessness is not just an economic issue, and that is how we as a city have been trying to address homelessness. In fact, shelters are actually made for someone like me, someone who's young and able-bodied and down on their luck and needs a couple of weeks or a couple of months with a bed. And what I saw when I was in the shelter was that people are far sicker and far older than I realized, and we need to address homelessness as a public health issue. In fact, I believe that our shelter should be under the Department of Public Health and not under Human Services Agency. And you know, Angela, I'm glad you talked about mental health, because that was one of the issues that I was going to talk about. You know, I worked with Ed Lee. He gave our office $6.6 million to expand the first 24-hour medical respite shelter in the South Market, where we cut the ribbon in December, which is staffed by nurses, clinicians, and psychologists, not minimum wage staff members that don't have the training to address the population that's coming in. We have to do more of that, and along what Amy was talking about the thousands of units that are already entitled but haven't been built. We need a $1 billion general obligation bond for affordable housing. And part of that money has to be spent on projects with over 1,000 units where we're building the most affordable housing and the most housing for formerly homeless, and help those developers who can't build because they can't afford the infrastructure, like the sewage, the electricity, the streets, the parks that go along with that development, so we can build those units faster into the ground.
Thank you. All right. Farah Weiss, you are up next.
All right, so Board President Breed. So it's, what? This is a debate, I don't understand. I haven't been on my time yet, please. So, as you know, I've been reaching out to you for the last couple of years to work on treating the encampment crisis like a true crisis. I still want to work together. That's my message, is I still want to work together. So, with that in mind, I'm curious though, let's say it's June 6th, in the first 90 days that you are mayor, are you going to help fulfill the promise of Ed Lee, or the vision of Ed Lee, to get 1,000 people transitioned out of the street into safe, organized spaces, and how do you propose that we do that?
Thank you for the question. And during my very short time when I served as acting mayor in the city and county of San Francisco, I focused all of my time, all of my attention, all of our city resources on the 10 encampments in places like Showplace, in places on Napoleon. And we didn't just go in and start clearing out 10 encampments. We had a team of people that met with folks, that talked to people, that tried to understand what their challenges were, and we tried to focus on people on an individual basis. And I'm sure some of the residents who live here have noticed that we went from over 210 encampments to less than 30 in Showplace. We completely cleared Napoleon, and people were wondering, well, where have many of those people gone? Some of them navigation centers, some of them into our shelter system, And then some of them have chosen to walk away from our services. And people have mentioned issues around substance abuse and mental health, and I told you already about my proposal for safe injection sites, but just recently I introduced legislation to change what we're doing around our mental health crises. We gotta treat it like a mental health crisis, and so I proposed legislation to move the conservatorship program out of the district attorney's office and into the city attorney's office, and to move the social workers from the Aging and Adult Services Department into the Department of Public Health, so that we actually set up the appropriate resources in the department to address these issues for people who sometimes, sadly, can't speak for themselves. And so we know at the end of the day that we're talking about people who need services, who need wraparound services. And so that's what I'm doing. That's what I did temporarily as acting mayor. That's what I will continue to do as mayor. I won't let up. I will be consistent with this particular issue.
So I have been working the last 2 years to come up with a strategy based on best practices and working in a community integrated way so that people can heal in community, belong in community, because not having access to a toilet, not having access to secure sleep or organization or a place to put your trash or a pathway and vocational and support and empowerment support. If we don't have these things, then we're going to continue seeing thousands of people on the street without access to these basic services. So once again, we know that we have, I just checked today, there's 1,150 people on the wait list for emergency shelter right now. In looking at the data for DPW and SFPD, in 2015 we spent $3 million with DPW to clean up encampments. That has tripled. That's where the Lee administration actually put more money, was into DPW, so they tripled it to $8.7 million just to deal with encampments. Do you know how much SFPD paid, or we pay them just to deal with encampments? The Budget and Legislative Analyst Report shows that it's $20.6 million. So believe it or not, working with encampment residents and organizers and housed residents and service providers and DPW workers and SFPD workers, we've come up with a plan for the Safe Organized Space Transitional Village program to transition 1,000 people off of the street into safe organized spaces within a 90-day period for the price of $9 million. That's a fraction of what we currently spend just to shuffle people around. And so my ask of you and everyone on this stage is that on June 6th, or even before, we start working together with the triage, because I know we need the housing ladder, we need people to get there, but right now we've exited hundreds of people back to the street from navigation centers and shelters. We need triage support right now.
Or we can move on, because we're kind of running late, so if folks don't want to respond, that'd be awesome.
Okay, I might as well take this opportunity to respond. And here's the thing. The part of your question that I didn't answer is, am I committed to Mayor Lee's plan to get 1,000 people off the street? We sadly know that we have at least over 7,000 people who are sleeping on our streets every night. And I am not only committed to doing everything I can to get those 1,000 people off the street, but I'm focused on working with the private sector on ending family homelessness in San Francisco, on just coming up with creative solutions, like what we did in my district, where we purchased the McDonald's site for less than market rate at Stanton and Haight to build 120 to 160, we're still working with the community on the number of unanticipated units, between 120 and 160 affordable units that were not anticipated to be built in the city and county of San Francisco. So those are the kinds of things that we need to do to address this issue. We have to continue to build more housing, we have to get creative about building more housing, and we have to focus on supporting our homeless population.
Mr. Leno is re-invoking.
Yeah, right. Just a point of fact that from recent surveys of the homeless population, that yes, we are somewhere north of 7,000 people who are without a home. They may be couch surfing, they may be doubling up with relatives or friends, but the number of people that the city estimates are on our streets on a daily basis, about 3,500.
Supervisor Kim, go for a minute.
I just think it's important that everybody know that everyone on this board and the mayor is committing to get 1,000 people off the streets of San Francisco, and it's going to happen before June 5th. But I also just want to say that 2 of those navigation centers are in my district. I have supported 4 navigation centers here in San Francisco over my time on the board, and what I'd love to hear from the candidates, all of the candidates tonight, is that they're committed to making sure that we have a navigation center in every neighborhood, because homelessness is not a problem that District 6 and the South Market and Timberland can solve alone. We have been doing our share. We need every part of the city to also take that up, because we're never going to solve homelessness if every shelter is in the South Market and Timberland.
You want to wave your blue card, or you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just giving her the mic.
No, it was because you said, you asked all of us whether we would accept applications.
I didn't know I could do that.
But you did. And so, as a consequence, that's millions and millions of dollars adding more and more navigational centers. I'm all for navigational centers when they start having a path to housing. Not when people go in and they get kicked out after 90 days. It has to have a path to permanent housing. Sure, you can have a navigation center where I live, you can have it out in the Sunset of Richmond, but if it doesn't lead to a path to housing, then I don't think any of them should stay open. And by the way, I learned today, they're all temporary. They're in places where real buildings, according to what I heard, are going to be built for affordable housing. And I have to ask, and I don't get a second question, but when you say that the McDonald's is affordable housing, what is affordable in this city? It's affordable for the very wealthy, that's what it is. We need way below affordable housing. Way below affordable housing for our workers, our teachers, our police, and our nurses who live there.
All right, we're getting back on track because I'm actually
I'm glad you asked that question, Angela. Because last year, me and my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors worked to change the inclusionary affordable housing laws here in the city, so that teachers and some of our janitors and other people who basically, they didn't make enough, they made too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to afford market rate. That's been my whole life in San Francisco with all of my friends who sadly couldn't afford to live here. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done on the Board of Supervisors to increase the area median income so that a family of 4, potentially making up to $135,000 a year, could actually qualify for affordable housing. We think, wow, that's a lot of money. It is. But in the city and county of San Francisco, when you think about the expenses and the rent and how much things cost, we have to do different. We have to look at creative ways to solve these problems. We are losing our families. We are losing our restaurant workers and so many people in San Francisco. And so that's one of the things we worked on at the Board of Supervisors that I was proud to be a leader of.
Senator Wiener, you get to pose a question to one of your opponents.
Thank you. I will ask my question to Supervisor Kim. Supervisor, there is a ballot initiative, I think signatures have been collected already, with regard to right to counsel. This would be for tenants who are at risk of eviction, and we know that there are statistics that show that when a tenant has counsel, the opportunity and success rate to keep them in their home is much greater. There's also a measure at the board, and I wondered if you could clarify what the difference between the two and which you are supporting.
So I was the first candidate here to support the right to counsel measure that the San Francisco Tenants Union has qualified for the ballot for June 5th. And Senator Leonard, I believe that you have endorsed that measure as well. And We have a right to counsel when you are at risk of losing your life and your liberty and you're in the criminal justice system. I also believe that needs to be expanded in deportation cases, and also when you are about to lose your home. And for many people that means that they have nowhere else to go. And we need to put a moratorium on these unfair evictions, by the way, until we have a fully funded right to eviction counseling program here in San Francisco for every single tenant. The difference, the distinction between the one that's being put for the ballot and what I've been seeing that's being written, that's being sponsored through the Board of Supervisors process, is that this is free and universal right to counsel for all tenants, which I support, as I did in my push for Free City College. The measure that is moving forward before the board is a right to counsel for some tenants, but not all. It's means tested. And I think that when you start to bring in that element, you really hurt so many of the residents, including middle-class residents that are fighting to stay here in San Francisco. But I will just say the vast majority of tenants that are getting evicted in San Francisco, the vast majority are seniors, immigrants who speak English as a second language, and individuals with disability. That is the vast majority of those that are being targeted for eviction today. And I think it's incredibly important for all of us to make sure that we are fighting for those people to stay in San Francisco, because that is why we love the city so much, because it's diverse, and we have to make sure we're fighting to keep them here.
Thank you. I would agree with you on the importance of the initiative process. There are figures that show that about 70% of those who are living on our streets without shelter were living under a roof in San Francisco before they became homeless. So to the degree that we can keep people who have a home in their homes, we're going to be addressing any chance that our homeless population is going to grow. So it also costs the city a lot less money through right to counsel or even rental assistance through tough times, keeping them in their homes than the cost to all of us taxpayers once they find themselves on the street. And another figure I came upon recently was that 41% of those living on the street right now became homeless in the past year. So we're not doing a good enough job. And these Ellis Act evictions must stop. I've tried to amend the Ellis Act. The California Association of Realtors stopped us in Sacramento. I wanted to be able to differentiate between speculators who were buying properties with the intent to evict all tenants. That's not for whom the Ellis Act was written. It was written for landlords for the purpose of going out of the business of being a landlord. That's the legal right. It's being abused by speculators. We should take them to court so they know that there is consequence when they abuse a law that was not written for them, so that they can turn around and make a quick profit. And that is not good public policy. They need to be stopped.
Yeah.
Everyone, you have a minute to respond, but I think you guys sound like you agree. All right, cycle 2. Supervisor Kim, actually, you're up next. You can ask another person a question, just not Angela Alioto.
My question was for Senator Mark Leno, and actually, I had a different question, but given the conversation that we just had about speculators, in 2014, we put up a measure called Proposition G, the anti-speculators tax. And my question for you is, did you support that measure in 2014, and would you support another measure in the future so that we can place a tax on individuals that buy buildings of a certain unit amount or more, 3 or 5 unit amount more, and then move to evict within the first year, the second year, within the first 5 years. And the tax starts at a high rate if you evict in the first year, which is actually when the vast majority of evictions happen, actually. It happens in the first year of ownership. And it moves down slowly over the 5 years. Because what we've been seeing is that a very small number of speculators, a dozen, are doing the vast majority of LSAC evictions. And they usually do it within the first year or within the first 5 years. So did you support this measure in 2014, and would you support one in the future?
So that was Prop G.
Proposition G.
Right. So yes, I did support it, and I think it makes good sense on a number of levels. We use our tax system to disincentivize behavior that is not for the greater good. It may be for the greater good of the special interest, but it's not for the greater public interest. And so I thought Prop G did make good sense, and yes, I would support it in the future. And it really reflects a philosophy that we should be seen more at City Hall than we do. And I would want to ask, can I ask a question back on my time? Well, we only have a minute to respond.
Make sure you got 20 minutes, yeah.
So, when you get your time, if you could let me know, could this have been done at the Board of Supervisors, or does it have to go to the ballot? So, you can get to that in just a second. But again, the greater philosophy here is that City Hall should be focusing more on public policy that incentivizes long-term investment in San Francisco for the greater good, rather than short-term benefit and short-term investment in San Francisco for the benefit of the special few. And so Prop G approaches this true to that philosophy, and I would be pleased to support it in the future. So if you could clarify that one point.
Yeah, so
you have 1 minute.
in answer to the Senator's question, any tax, unfortunately, via Proposition 13.
Even that, yeah.
Yeah, any tax, which costs where you're collecting more than the cost of the fee must go before the voters, which is why Proposition G did not go through the Board of Supervisors, but it went through the forced signature route back in 2014. It did not ultimately pass that year, but I agree with you. We have to go back to the voters with this measure. The vast majority of Ellis Active victors do it within the first 5 years of ownership. These aren't long-term property owners. We're not trying to fight long-term families that have owned properties for decades and decades. The vast majority of Ellis Active evictions are done by speculators who buy a property and within a year often move to quickly evict the tenants, often seniors again, individuals with disabilities, and immigrants that speak English as a second language. And this activity absolutely must be penalized in the city, and it hasn't been.
Yeah. You have a minute, but you know, you have to use it.
I'll let
Supervisor London Breed, you get to pose the next question.
So it's almost 8 o'clock, and I thought this was going to be over at about 8.
We said 8:15, and then there's another candidate added, so it's going to, here we go.
Okay, because I don't want to be rude, but I have another engagement, and so I will ask my question.
Okay.
And go from there. Okay. So I know I'll pose my question to Supervisor Kim. I know that earlier you talked about general obligation bond, a $1 billion general obligation bond. Last week, you called for this $1 billion general obligation bond to be placed on the November ballot for affordable housing. Will your $1 billion proposal increase property taxes and thus increase housing costs for both renters and owners? And how will you fund the other planned GO bond, which supports parks and earthquake safety and retrofit and the seawall, public health and transportation? Many that are in the pipeline that could potentially impact those projects and also our credit rating for the city and county of San Francisco.
So last week I did announce a proposal to put forward a $1 billion general obligation bond before the voters, because I do believe that affordable housing has and continues to be a huge crisis. I was proud that the city passed one of the largest affordable housing bonds in our history at $310 million several years ago, but we know that that's just not enough. Every candidate here says that they understand that a sufficient supply of affordable housing, that we need a sufficient supply of affordable housing, and that each says that we will build more faster, and that they're committed to Mayor Edley's commitment to building 5,000 units a year. But we're already achieving that, and we have the housing crisis that we today. In order to make a big dent in our housing crisis, we need something much larger. The county of Santa Clara passed a $1 billion GO bond to address homelessness and affordable housing. And I think we need to do that here. One, we need to accelerate entitled units that have already been approved, where many of these projects are hitting 25, 30% affordable and middle income housing. And these developers aren't building because they can't finance the infrastructure that's associated with the housing. So we need to make sure that we are supporting that infrastructure so we can get that housing to the ground. Second, we need more small site acquisition. We can't just build. That's not happening fast enough. We need to take rent-controlled buildings off the market and make them permanently affordable for residents. So this is housing that's already been built. Let's take it off the speculative market, make it part of San Francisco ownership or community land trust. I think that we have to prioritize this, and I think that we can do this, and maybe there'll be a slight increase in property taxes, but we have to make sure that we do that modestly because we can't burden our property taxes with this. But we also may have to put aside other bonds as we move forward with this. I think that this is a crisis. I think that this is the #1 issue for San Franciscans, so we should make this #1 issue in our bond program.
Thank you, and I do agree that it's a crisis, and it's why we put on the ballot a commercial real estate tax that is the Housing for All ballot measure, where we hope to generate $1 billion for affordable middle-income housing, small site acquisition program, and a number of the things that you're talking about, because that is the way that I think it's a better way to raise the money rather than increasing property taxes on small property owners in San Francisco.
So, I actually love the commercial gross receipts measure that Supervisor Sakai has introduced for housing. I just wish he didn't pick the same revenue measure that I had introduced a month earlier for early childhood education and childcare. And I just have to say this, there are dozens of revenue sources that we can go for. We don't have to choose between childcare and affordable housing. Families don't have to choose between paying out of pocket $22,000 a year so they have a place for their children to go to learn so they can go to work, or whether we should be investing more in affordable housing. So what I'm proposing instead is let's look at another revenue source for affordable housing. Let's look at a bigger revenue source for affordable housing because we know how expensive it is both to build and to acquire. And so I think that what we should be looking again is at progressive taxation measures, which I've always supported while I've been on the Board of Supervisors, and put forward a big one for November so we can support both child care in June and a bigger revenue measure for housing in November.
So yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say at this point that if the SAFE measure didn't have the poison pill element to it that canceled out the early childhood education, that Jane might not have put that out as a suggestion. Although it is a bold suggestion, and we do need bold suggestions in these times about how we have...
with a 5% increase on commercial gross receipts.
So we probably actually could have both pass, and maybe SAFE can take that out of the measure. I don't know if it's too late, but to work together in order to make sure, and maybe everyone can ensure that the early childhood education measure, even if the other measure for affordable housing gets more votes, that we find room in the budget for the early childhood education. Another thing, let's put a spin on the terrible tax cuts that Trump did at the national level for corporations, where it went from 35% to 21%. Let's put a spin on that and say we can capture that locally. Corporations aren't going to be paid to the federal level, so we can capture that at the regional, state, and local level.
All right, I have two more implications.
So I just want to thank Amy for bringing that point up. I would support both commercial gross receipts measure that's on the June ballot, both for childcare and affordable housing. Because frankly, commercial property owners are paying the lowest tax rate in the country at 0.3%. Now let's put that into context. In New York City, the commercial gross receipts tax rate is 4 to 6%. My increase, the one I introduced with Supervisor Normandy, is a 3.5% increase. Supervisor Safai has proposed a 2% increase. Let's have a measure where we do both. We'll still be below the city of New York City, and we can fund more affordable housing and more child care.
Yes, on the issue of both affordable housing and on revenue streams. One place that City Hall has been failing us over the years is on making sure we put into the pipeline general obligation bonds for affordable housing. The first one we did was in 1999. The second one we did was just a couple years ago. So almost a generation passed. Affordable housing has been a crisis in San Francisco for more than a generation. And so if we're thinking about what our major challenges are, then minimally in the pipeline we should be planning affordable housing general obligation bonds at least every 5 years, because the need is at least that great. And with regard to capturing some of that corporate tax saving coming out of Washington, D.C., we could increase corporate gross receipts taxes by 0.25%, that's 140 million, and a 5.5% increase, twice that.
We still have some stuff to do, so if anybody needs to leave, we are over time. Yeah. Amy, you get the next question.
President Breed, just kidding, gotcha. So let's talk about vacancy taxes and impact taxes. So I'll direct this at Jane, but everyone feel free to jump in on this one as well. So one of the issues that we have right now is that if you are a store or a property owner and you have an empty storefront, do you know how much you pay a year to keep it vacant? $700, that's your impact fee. You usually get a tax write-off for that too. So we're having some issues right now with activating our empty storefronts and our empty units and parcels that have sat vacant because they have an entitlement already, but they aren't building upon them. So with this issue of increasing the impact fee and the stick, you know, and the carrot and the stick proposal for activating these empty spaces, what are your ideas for doing that?
So the easy answer is to say that I support a vacancy tax, which I actually do in concept. What has been challenging about it, and I speak now from a policymaker standpoint, is that we have not figured out how to differentiate between property owners that are truly trying to find a tenant and cannot, and not penalizing those good property owners, and the ones that are just frankly greedy and are holding their ground floor retail vacant because they're waiting for the Chase Bank or you know, that high revenue retail option that's preventing small business owners from coming in and activating our neighborhoods and ground floor. The number one thing we have to be doing is we have to invest more revenue in enforcement. The planning department has very few dollars that goes towards enforcing the vacancy registry that Farah Weiss just talked about. And you can raise the fee, because we don't have the enforcement officers. So when you raise a fee, you have to justify that cost by saying that there's a reason for raising a fee, and I think we absolutely can. We can absolutely justify that by saying we don't have the enforcement to make sure that our existing laws are even being followed. Very few property owners actually register in our vacancy registry right now, which I think proves and demonstrates that we can raise the fee so we can actually hire more planning enforcement officers to go out there and work with these property owners to fill their vacancy. And if they don't, and they refuse to, then actually levy the penalties and assessments that need to be put into place so we can activate all of our neighborhoods.
So I think we can actually up it a bit and say that the impact fee is not just about being able to administer the program, but to say that there is a measurable economic impact when a property owner leaves their property vacant, and it affects the whole cultural district and economics of the area, which happened on Market Street. And unfortunately, the city went in a direction to support and give jackpot-style ROIs to the property owners who had kept Market Street vacant and blighted for such a long time, instead of putting an impact fee and working on a vacancy tax at the time, and instead gave the Twitter tax break. So that, I think that was a misdirection for the city at that point. But moving forward, one of the things that I have learned from fellow candidate Ellie Zhao, who's in Chinatown, is that she's a small property owner. And she was telling me that there are thousands of Chinese American property owners that are actually keeping their units empty right now because they're afraid of activating them and getting stuck with a tenant or getting sued or something to that effect. So talking together with her, we said, what if the city, through the Mayor's Office of Housing, actually created a program to support small property owners by expanding the Dahlia system from OCD. And so if you are a worker in San Francisco, or you're a family with a student in SFUSD, and you're paying more than 50% of your income for rent currently, or you can't afford to live in the city, we could have a registry through Dahlia, and we could actually support small property owners with screening and management, and we could do an assessment of their property. So we're actually working together, because what happens if we don't support the small property owners? They sell to the market, and then they ELIS evict, and then everybody gets displaced. And so this is a win-win for the small property owner and the tenant. What do you think about that idea?
So first of all, the registry fee unfortunately is linked to the cost of running the registry program or the enforcement. So that's a little bit different from the impact fee. Now, impact fee you can assess through a nexus study on new development. You can't actually assess that on existing property owners. So that would be the challenge of doing that. Although I love that idea of figuring out the cost of what a vacant storefront does to a neighborhood and then assessing an impact fee through a nexus study. You can't do that on existing property owners. You can do that on new development. That's something that we can certainly look at. But I do think that ultimately, because of these restrictions we have via state law, we can't do whatever we want to do. We should actually be looking at expanding our vacant registry program, because very few property owners, again, even register. So we have to increase enforcement, and I think that justifies increasing the fee, the $700 that commercial property owners currently pay. And we also, that's the carrot, we also have to, that's the stick, we also have to fund the carrots. We have to incentivize our property owners to both take in small retail, but also maybe look at bringing in arts organizations and nonprofits and giving them a break and subsidizing the rent so they can actually get over that way.
I just wanted to add to this needing more reinforcement. This city, sometimes at these panels, I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. This city spends $10 billion. $10 billion, and we're hearing that we need more people to enforce the laws. Have you ever considered auditing these departments and finding out where the waste is instead of audited these departments and found out where the waste is and why the enforcement isn't happening? I feel like there's absolutely no discipline going on with these department heads. They get away with murder. And at the same time, we're talking about hiring more people to enforce something that we have a pre-existing duty to already enforce in a $10 billion budget.
Thank you. We are with that there. Next question of somebody else.
So this will be for Supervisor Breed. And Common Cause has stated that super PACs are a disaster for democracy, and that they are an end run around our anti-corruption campaign finance reform laws, because they allow for unregulated and unlimited contributions. So they are by definition corrupt. Yes. So on your website, you have said that you would reject outside influences such as super PACs, but there are already 2 super PACs set up for your benefit. One of them has already done a hit piece on me, and we don't know who funded it, so minimally we should make sure that there is disclosure. How much time do I get for questions?
No, you don't have to.
Oh, already out of time. So, I'm asking if you would please sign our pledge to denounce, renounce, and reject all super PACs, any for me or against any of my opponents, the same for all of us. Yeah.
What's interesting about this question and Senator Leno's pledge is that he's been in elected office for over 20 years and the beneficiary of PACs, and there's never been a pledge in the past. So I'm just wondering why all of a sudden in this race there's a pledge. And I made it clear, I'm not a follower, I'm a leader. And you were proposing a pledge, and I put up my own pledge.
Right.
Making it clear that I denounce negative campaigning, making it clear that I will run a fair, clean, transparent campaign. And Senator Leno also knows that we can't coordinate with these PACs. We can't have conversations and coordinate. So yes, today I denounce them. That's not the issue here. The issue is the fact that maybe these PACs aren't spending money on your behalf like they did in the past. And so now all of a sudden it's an issue. So no, I won't tell women to be quiet. And if I get the Alice B. Toklas LGBT Democratic Club endorsement, no, I won't tell members of the LGBT community to be quiet. If people want to move forward and campaign positively on my behalf, I will not tell them to sit down and shut up, but I will denounce any negative campaigns against any of my opponents, which I have said here today and regularly on occasion.
So, words are one thing, action is another. There's already been a hit piece put out by a super PAC for your benefit, but there was no denouncement of
I just
it.
announced it.
Well, you can, as I've suggested, all of us sign this pledge. You're the only one on the stage who has not signed this pledge. It's not about being a leader or a follower. It's a very simple pledge. And if we all join hands in unison, we could change the way this election will be run. So it's not special interests who will be influencing the outcome of the election. It will just be our campaigns. We can participate in public funding for this race, meaning taxpayers will help us if we take a pledge not to spend more than $1.475 million. That is more than enough for us to communicate with the voters of San Francisco. We don't need many, many more times millions of dollars being spent in these super PACs. And that is the history of what's going on in San Francisco here. We've seen the Koch brothers do it nationwide. This is happening in San Francisco currently, and we could change that. So this is not about Ron Conway. Let me repeat, this is not about Ron Conway. This is about super PACs and those like Ron Conway who contribute to them. So, again, we could change how we do business here. Yes, I have not been in public office over 20 years. I have been in office 18 years, and there have been super PACs. I'm not denying that. But today's today. It's about the future. Let me finish. It's about the future of whether we want other than voters to influence the outcome of this election. We can do something about it now.
Let me just say, Senator Leno, when you announced your candidacy and you started raising money last year, you raised over $400,000, and the law went into effect January 1st of this year to ban lobbyists from contributing to campaigns. Will you return the over, I think, $14,000 that you collected from lobbyists in your campaign? I opened my account this year. I don't have any lobbyist money. It's illegal as of January 1st. So will you return the money that you received from lobbyists, especially?
I would. So I have been criticized for having made a decision to run for mayor last year. I didn't make a decision after the unfortunate and untimely passing of Ed Lee. I knew I wanted to get involved and do everything I can to offer my passion and energy for San Francisco. So I raised money last year. I abided by every law that there is. And if there's anything illegal in the money that I raise, I will gladly return it.
So you get to ask a question of somebody else now. That's where we're at.
Okay, well, I want to stay on this topic, because this topic is extremely
Okay, let's
important.
give her
And
2 minutes.
believe me, I'm a trial lawyer, I'll make it a question. And I'll cross-examine on it. The point isn't you won't let women stand up for you. The point isn't you won't let the wrong colony stand up for you. You won't let anybody stand up for you. The point is it's corrupt. It's an unlevel playing field. And what I would think that you as a minority woman would want to show that you want the level playing field that everybody else in this race has. Because, let me finish. Because we have no idea. We have no idea where that money came from.
I don't either.
But doesn't it bother you that you don't know?
Let's say like the So
I just had to announce it. What is that?
Right.
You know,
I just want to say what the rules are right now because this is like going nuts. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to respond. Angela can respond to that, and then we're going to.
and all I'm going to say is, it's really unfortunate that with Angela Alioto and Senator Leno, they've been in politics for many, many years. They know you can't coordinate with these particular interest groups, number one. And we know what people mean when they try to imply that I, a person who worked my butt off to get to where I am, and by all of a sudden in politics, worked in the community, saved and changed lives, all of a sudden, I'm now beholden to someone.
Right.
It's offensive. It's offensive. And let me tell you something. As I told you before, I don't do this job in fear of losing it. I have lives that have been lost in the city. I want to change the city for the better. I'm not wealthy, I'm a renter in a rent-controlled unit living in San Francisco. I believe in justice and I believe in fairness. I've gotten certificates from Senator Leno for the work I've done in the community. And all of a sudden in the political world, I'm beholden to someone.
No, you're not.
What will happen when I am mayor is I will continue to do everything I can to lead this city with my heart, with all of my soul, to make sure that we put forth the kinds of creative and bold solutions that we need to settle our most pressing problems. People are tired of the finger pointing. They want to hear about the issues. How are we going to solve homelessness? How are we going to deal with issues around housing? How are we going to make sure that the people who walk in my office looking for support get the support they need? That's what I'm committed to, and that's what I'll continue to be committed to as mayor.
Respond when she answered the question, and then we're going to have 1 minute closings. If you want to say something, you've already used your 2 minutes, you can say it in your closing statement.
Just on that point, if I may.
No.
My name was invoked, and there was a suggestion that I have said that Supervisor Breed is beholden. I never mentioned that. I'd like 30 seconds to respond. She brought up my name and misquoted me. I've never said anything of the sort.
Angela?
I have never in my life taken money from any special interest. I have fought the tobacco industry my whole life. I have never taken one of these PACs. My point, because I'm telling you, that's why, and you cannot question my integrity. I'm telling you, I have never taken it. And the point is, these PACs the point is, it's corrupting our system. You need to understand, look what just happened on the national level. It's corrupting our system. This dark money can be given by anybody or any other country that wants to defeat you, and it should be negated at every step of the way. And in a mayor's race in the city and county of this great city, it's embarrassing that it's even an issue. The dark money is going into this campaign when everybody should have a level playing field, and we should be able to negate the fact that you don't owe anything to anybody, especially Ron Conway.
Senator Leno, we are going to give you 30 seconds to jump in, and then we are going to do our
So
closing
I
statement.
just wanted to clarify, this pledge does not ask anybody to sit down and be quiet. Anyone who wants to contribute can contribute on a level playing field, maximum $500 into a campaign. This is not about the Alice B. Toklas Club, which is a club which has a mission, which operates throughout the year, every year. That is different from a super PAC that is set up specifically to funnel unlimited, deep-pocketed, secretive funds from special interests. That's the difference.
That is seeming more appropriate now. All right, we are moving on to closing statements. Amy Farah Weiss, you are first up.
So I am the first generation of my family to go to college. I went to De Anza Community College, and then I went to UC Santa Cruz. I also went to SF State and got a master's degree in organizational development. And I spent the last 20 years of my life dedicated to empowering individuals, organizations, and the community for well-being. I've been a community organizer. I worked in a variety of fields. I started the nonprofit, the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge. In 2011, I started the nonprofit Neighbors Developing Divisadero because I realized that we needed a strategic yes to the issues that were happening, and we needed to think like developers. So I learned the code, the zoning code, and I started to do the work to figure out how do we right these wrongs of the past and actually create a strategic, actionable, and inspiring vision to make San Francisco an epicenter of equity. Harvey Milk said, don't wait until election day to know where your candidate stands on issues. So, with that in mind, I would love for KQED, I'm going to put the challenge on you, and I'm going to say there's only been 2 articles so far that have shown the differences about an issue, and that has been on the issue of tasers. But all of us on this stage have filled out about 12 to 15 different endorsement questionnaires. Wouldn't you, the public, like to see KQED and the Chronicle and the Examiner and SF Weekly take those 15 questionnaires and do an analysis and see what the differences are between the candidates? Thank you very much. And by the way, I had to fight to be up here today because I was initially excluded, but I had 60 people support me to get on this ballot because they think that I speak for the people, and I really do. And I actually believe in democracy, and it's important for all of us to work together to co-create these solutions. Vote 1, 2, 3 for equity. Use all 3 votes. And if you vote for me, it doesn't matter if I'm not the first. Put me at second or third, and it's a referendum to say, please invest in these strategies that I'm putting forward.
As I said, I was born and raised in San Francisco. I've been pushed out of my neighborhood. I've been pushed out of places. Hell, I was pushed out of the mayor's office. But here I stand. Here I stand. That's right. Ready to do whatever it takes to take care of some of our most pressing issues. 7,000 people need our help around homelessness. They need us to address that issue in a creative and responsible way. For every 8 jobs we created in San Francisco, we only built 1 unit of housing. We have got to do more, and we have got to deal with the process, and we have got to get forceful and creative. We have car break-ins and home invasions, and we have to make sure that there are neighborhood prosecutors in every police district station to help address those particular issues as well. We know that together we can address those issues. We know with strong leadership, with bold leadership, we can change San Francisco for the better. I believe in that promise. I'm standing here because of some amazing programs and an amazing community despite the obstacles. All of the candidates here are talking about the disadvantage and the kinds of people that they want to help. Well, I was that person for over 20 years of my life. And I know what's best for me. And I won't tell you what's best for you. I will ask you to work with me on these issues, to work with me on real solutions to deal with these challenges. I'm looking forward to seeing a San Francisco with new housing, a San Francisco with more children, a San Francisco with no tents, a San Francisco with a change where when you walk out your door, you feel the difference. That's what I'm proposing to you as your next mayor. Go to my website for information on my platform, londonformayor.com. Thank you so much.
San Francisco deserves a mayor that has ideas as big as the challenges that we are facing here today. Over the last 10 years that I've been serving, I have been that elected official. I have put forward big and bold ideas, and I have won on them. I have won record levels of affordable middle-income housing that has set the bar across the nation. I have made San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college free again, and now I'm fighting to make child care and early childhood education affordable for every single family. I'm not the strongest candidate for affordable housing because I grew up in subsidized below market rate housing as a child. I'm the strongest candidate for affordable housing because I have negotiated and won more affordable middle income housing than any sitting legislator over the last 7 years. And that is what I've done with 3 legislative staff members. So imagine what I can do with thousands. I'm running for mayor because here in San Francisco, we have an opportunity. We are not just a liberal city, we are a wealthy city, which means that we have the resources to implement dream policies that other municipalities can't even fantasize about. And that is what I've done. I've gone to the voters over and over again, asked them to give a little bit more, asked those that are doing the best in San Francisco, that are profiting the most, to give back to the rest of the city so that we can make this more equitable. There was a time when government used to invest in building public housing and used to invest in building affordable housing. There was a time in the state of California that we invested in K-12 public education system. Here in San Francisco, we can invest in those institutions again. We can invest in our citizens and show the nation what it means to truly be progressive by investing in our citizens and showing the outcomes of what that means, and turn back the tide on 40 years of terrible policies that have dismantled the very social infrastructure that used to grow the middle class here in this country. We can do that here in San Francisco. We can regrow and strengthen our middle class again. Thank you very much.
I'm running for mayor of San Francisco because I have never seen my city look the way it looks. I have never seen so many poor people living on our streets. When I went down about 6 months ago and surveyed the amount of tents that were south of Market, the amount of tents that were on Alabama Street, the amount of tents under the freeways, it is absolutely disgraceful that we are one of the richest cities in the nation and have over 7,000 people living on our streets. That is not acceptable. I'm experienced. I know how to take care of homelessness. We did it. I have a record at City Hall where I know how to pass legislation and get it done. I know how to create affordable housing. I know how to create mixed housing where you've got formerly homeless, below market value, affordable, up to luxury. We do mixed housing in San Francisco that used to be marvelous for our citizens, and we haven't done anything like it in the last 5 years. When we did the homeless plan, we built 7 different buildings. We rebuilt them. We didn't spend one penny more than the budget that allowed it. And we did it right, and those people are still housed. You know, I go to all of these panels, and I hear about all the affordable housing that's been done. And yet when I come out and speak to all of you in your neighborhoods, all I hear about is there's no housing. People's children cannot live here. We need to have the affordable, below affordable housing, market rate housing, where people can afford to live here. And so we need to build more housing. But we don't have to do it at the expense of ruining our neighborhoods, at the expense of changing what our city looks like. I'm running for mayor of San Francisco because of the crime situation in the city. Just in the last 24 hours, 2 of my friends have had a burglar come into their home and steal from the basement of their home. That is not San Francisco. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. Please go to aliotoformayor.com, check out all of our policies, and I hope you vote for me in June. Thank you all so much.
It is my honor to be on a stage with 4 very accomplished individuals. We are all trailblazers. We wouldn't be here otherwise. We are all glass ceiling breakers, or we wouldn't be here otherwise. When I came out as a gay man at age 18, a Stonewall baby, 1969, it was to announce to the world that I was a mentally ill criminal. No exaggeration here. The American Psychiatric Association did not remove homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses until 1973. Even here in California, it was until 1977 that adults of the same gender having consensual relations was a felony. A felony. So my life has been about fighting for equality and justice and dignity for all people, and that battle goes on today. Because there are over 12 states in this country that are trying to put us back in the closet and create laws against us. There are still no protections in federal law from discrimination in housing and employment for LGBTQ people. We have a crisis nationwide. I share this with you because I have taken the strength that it has encouraged me to make sure that these laws get changed, to become the first openly gay man in the California State Assembly, to become the first state senator who was openly gay man, and to fight an epidemic in the 1980s and 90s that is still ongoing today, that not only killed my love of my life, but his 23-year-old brother 4 years earlier. So it is that kind of tenacity and commitment and sensitivity to social justice and criminal justice reform. And yes, we envision a city that's affordable, and a city that is clean, and a city that is fair. But who's going to stand up to the powers who be, the status quo that is keeping us as we are today? Please vote for me, markleno.com. I will take care of that for you.